you always have this gift with words? I mean, did you write stories and things when you were a schoolboy? Poetry and things?
Yeah, I wrote all sorts of things. I was a horribly precocious child when it came to writing. You know, I thought I knew it all at 14. I read loads and loads of books and everything. And of course, later on, you realize how idiotic you must have become. And I stopped reading altogether. I started, you know, periodically to get interested in reading again. But you know, it was always one of the things that I enjoyed most of all was writing. So I must have learned something along the way, you know.
Well, I mean, your lyrics are very, no, well, I was going to say literary, but that, I mean, that makes them, that sounds a bit too cold. But I don't know.
I know how to use words. That's one of the things that I've learned how to do. You know, I've been doing this for 9 years now, and I'm getting better at it.
So there are lots of people who still can't string 3 words together.
Well,
surely it's not something you learn, is it?
Well, I mean, you learn something about it from each. You know, you learn how to measure things out. This is a better written record than any other record I've ever done. Even if people personally don't like the sound of it, or have always hated the sound of my voice, and are no more inclined to like it now than they were 8 years ago. This is just technically better written. It's just a fact. There was more care. Well, not more care went into the writing of it because I wrote the songs very quickly, but I allowed myself more freedom of thought in that I didn't have to consider. I was off the road and I didn't have to consider all those other words. You know, the brain is only like some kind of, you know, organic computer, and it must surely be able to contain so many thoughts and words. And if I have to remember all of my songs, after all, at any one time when I'm on the road with the attractions, I might draw from any of 50 songs any night and just go into them. That's a lot of memory you need to just do that. It's a memory feat, of quite a considerable memory feat. And having been free from having to even consider those songs from being off the road, I just rolled a lot of these ideas around my head. And then when it came time to write them, the songs came out almost complete in very short periods of time. So it's just the way my mind works. I can't help it, Your Honour.
To change tack somewhat, your perceived stature as an artist seems almost to have grown in inverse proportion to your record sales, dare I say it. Does that bother you?
Well, obviously I would like to reach a wider audience, and everybody wants to have a degree of success. It depends on whether it's a small victory or a qualified success by, you know, having success with something that you know isn't as substantial. I've had a couple of, the only chart action that I've had with, say, singles in the last few years has been with songs that I haven't really been as substantial emotionally, or they haven't really had as much substance to the lyric. They've just been attractive records to people's ears. And there's no disgrace in that. And in some ways, it's good to remind people that you are capable of doing that. You know, I can write pop songs standing on my head. You know, I mean, I have some kind of gift for melody as well as words, and it's good to remind people from time to time, because it all gets bogged down in a very serious sort of thing, and I start getting, you know, other people take me too seriously. I'm much more lighthearted about the whole thing. Even when I'm dealing with quite serious subjects, you have to retain a sense of humour, otherwise it drives you mad.
I wondered if you got the same kind of pressure, say, from your record company as other people do to have hit records and be commercially successful, or whether they're in fact so sort of overawed by your major artist status.
No, I mean, to them it must be a major cause of frustration, I'm sure, that if I had £5 and they had £5 for every good review I'd had, that we'd all be much wealthier. So I must be frustrating to them, and perhaps I've been added to that by doing perverse things at times when the correct commercial route is something else than the thing I've done, like making the country record. So I have maybe exasperated certain record company people, but there's no way they can put me under any pressure. I can only make the record that I'll make, and sometimes you lose sight of what it is you meant to be doing. To that point, I would say that the last record was pretty confused and not overall pretty much of a failure. It had some good songs on it that weren't realised, and it had some indifferent songs that were done quite well. So overall it was just the most uneven record that I've made. But there are plenty of other people in the world that would have been happy to have made that record. I mean, by my own standards, it was pretty much of a bad record, but it's not an unlistenable record, and it's unfair to the people that worked on it to just damn it, and also to the people that parted with money for it, you know, to whom it might mean a lot.
I once heard you say, as a sort of for instance, that you'd never heard anything by, say, The Cure. Do you take any interest in chart pop?
I have heard something about The Cure now. I quite like some of their records. I don't listen to the radio very much anymore. I used to listen incessantly to the radio about 1978, 79, and then periodically I get interested in what's going on in the pop process and that whole merry-go-round. And I think that's what you can recognize when that happens. The kind of albums that I make when I address that as armed forces was very in keeping with, well, it wasn't in keeping, but you could tell that I'd been listening to pop records of that year. Punch the Clock was a more competitive pop record than say Imperial Bedroom, which was more similar to this record. Although it was incredibly complicated a record, it had no bearing on any of the records that came out that year. So just I go on and off it. Sometimes I love pop, other times I hate it. Currently, I don't find anything to excite me. I turn the radio on for a few seconds, and if they're talking, I almost invariably switch it off immediately. If they're playing a record, I leave it on long enough to decide whether I want to listen to it. But I'm not neurotic enough to sort of, or I've got enough good music in my house and in my flat that I can listen to, records if I want to hear a good song. I don't have to sit there like Nipper the dog, in front of the speaker waiting for the next wise word from the radio.
How do you then pick up on the young groups that you have from time to time produced? I mean, there's Special AKA, the Bluebells, of course, recently the Pogues. Is that from word of mouth?
Yeah, sometimes word of mouth, or you hear about them, you go along and see them play. So, really the only groups I did co-produce a Squeeze album, which was more a question of being friends with them, and they could have produced the record themselves. I was like being another set of eyes, another set of ears for what was going on, and just making sure that they did their best. The record would have made itself. Particularly with the Specials and more recently with the Pogues, it's more a question of there's something absolutely unique about those groups that could actually be damaged by a more professional producer who is determined to stamp his personality on the group. And young groups are sometimes quite malleable, and they come in with a tremendous amount of conviction, and they get bullied by the record company. That was the case with the Bluebells, which is why I stopped working with them, was because what I was attempting to do was not anything of what the record company had in mind, and they proceeded to bend them completely out of shape. They made them, from when I worked with them, they went through 2 or 3 different producers until they sort of found themselves again, With the Pogues, it's really just a question of, it's like catching lightning. I mean, it's just, they are just unique, and all you can do is try and get the best sound and sit there waiting for them to do the exceptional performance of what is already a very good song.